Good evening, everyone. My name is Ken Miller. I'm the director of Superior District Library, of which Bayless is a member. And I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. Jim Menard is a Sault Ste. Marie native who spent 40 years as a heavy equipment master mechanic. With editor Jan Reed and graphic designer Bill Garish, he has recently published the book, which is titled
Oshkosh WT-2206, America's Cold Warrior.
Okay, copies will be available for purchase and signing. Please welcome the author, Jim Menard.
Good evening, and thanks everybody for coming out tonight. It's a nasty night, and I appreciate everybody, your support. I've got Bill and Jan here with me. We're going to kind of just go through the book and explain what we did and problems we encountered. It can be sort of like a how not to write a book seminar. But a lot of people ask me, why did you write a book like that? You know, and ever since I was a little kid, I used to go to work with my brother-in-law. He was a sergeant in the Air Force, and I saw one of those trucks go by one time, and it just caught my eye. I never saw anything that big go that fast. I was dumbfounded by it. Later on, I was always looking at Oshkosh things, and I've been around a lot of heavy equipment, and I've always wondered, why isn't there anything about this truck? You go online, you know, you do a Google search on stuff, and you'll see a picture here and there, and I never could find anything on it. And so I started to dive into it a little deeper, and it sort of faded away. And I wrote an article for a magazine one time on, I had manufactured a snowblower that went on the front of my truck. So there was this magazine called Power Wagon Advertiser. So I put how I did it in this magazine. So I was cleaning out my office one day, and I found these pictures. This picture here I took when I was in I think the 8th grade, with my little plastic camera. That was my first color camera. I got it at Grove Drug Store down here.
I have to add, Jim insisted on that first picture being there. Jim, there's so many better pictures, you know, than this one. And he said, no, this has got to be in there. Just a week ago, he told me why. That was the first picture I took in color.
Yeah, that was my first color photograph. I developed that in my basement. I had a little photo lab down there. His brother and I used to take pictures all the time with cameras. And we at Loretto, we graduated from Loretto, and we worked in the photo, in the lab there. Pictures for the yearbook. And so I didn't have a lot of money. But anyway, we took the picture of the truck, and I told Bill, I said, that's the one I want. We were going to put a tag. It was a nomenclature
actually,
tag.
I think it is on the next.
Okay.
Isn't it? It's still there, isn't it?
Get rid of those bubbles.
We might have next
Yeah, the next one, I think.
The name of our
The
company,
editor
we made our own printing company. We called it Northland Press, and we self-published this book. So we just called it Northland Press. And as you go down through it, the ISBN number, when you're writing a book, each book is assigned an ISBN. You have to purchase that in order to, I believe it's for category. Jen, you know more.
Mainly if you're going to sell it through a retail outlet, like a bookstore, obviously. If you're doing it maybe just for a local, or maybe like a historical society, something that's going to strictly stay local, you maybe don't necessarily need to invest in an ISBN number, or if you're doing it for family, that kind of thing. But if you're planning on reselling it through retail outlets, you need an ISBN number to do that.
You can purchase those online. There's a company called Bowker, B-O-W-K-E-R. And I think they were $80 a piece or $70.
125, I think. Yeah.
And then you can, I guess you can buy them in lots of 10, and I didn't know that. I'm waiting for, when you write a book, you have to submit 2 copies to the Library of Congress. I didn't know that. It's a law. Otherwise, you don't have any copyright. It's registered then. So you send them to, I'm waiting, the next time we print, when this batch here is gone, we have to put our I should be getting it takes about 6 or 7 months, but with our government, it's probably going to take till next year. So I'm waiting on that, and then it'll go right below that ISBN, I believe. I don't know how we're going to do that. I think we have to resubmit. This book was digitally printed. There's quite a difference between offset printing, and Bill can tell you more about that. And let's think all we need. We got photo credits there, the cover photo. If you look at that drawing there, the man driving that truck is seated right here in our audience. That's Tim Gregory. That truck is out at the Air Force, the X-Base, Chippewa County International Airport. I took that when did we do that, Tim, in March?
Yeah, it was the spring.
We fired the truck up, and that was the cover shoot. It took about 6 gigabytes of high definition photo, and with Bill and I narrowed it down and said, this is the one. And he modified it and cleaned it all up and
Made it look pretty.
made it look pretty. I don't know. Perfume on a pig. But I was kind of joking. I called Tim and I said, well, pal, you made the cover of the Rolling Stone. So he's indelibly
There's
etched.
lots of little things, like for instance on the picture of the truck, the lights weren't on. And, it needed to be. It was a gray day, so I made that happen. I think we might have put the blue enhanced.
Yeah,
It's
the
been
beacon.
enhanced.
Yeah.
Every photo in this book there's been some form of intervention in it. There's 709 images. So it was a juggernaut.
Yeah, it would, we had to break the truck. We started out with, the truck is basically from a 1930 series of vehicles that Oshkosh produced. It was called the W series, and it ran all the way up till 1965. This was the last production W series truck, and they quit making those in 1965, and after that they had a rebuild program that they sold to the Air Force, where they would bring those trucks in, and for a third of the cost of a new truck, they would completely rebuild it down to the frame, take it down to the bare frame, put a new diesel in it, and just refurbish it completely. It saved the taxpayers millions and millions of dollars. And that truck there has been remanned, I think, 3 times. The one that's out at Chippewa County International. There's another one out there, its sister, it's a blower. And that's one of the last W series blowers on this continent right now. There's one down at Wurtsmith, it's called Oshkosh Wurtsmith. It's not fitted like this one, but they're getting pretty rare. And a lot of them are ended up in junkyards. But anyway, it's from the W series family, and there were smaller trucks. The Air Force bought most of these. We had to. I didn't delve too deeply into Oshkosh's history because it was there's just so much there. So I called to Oshkosh and I said, I really can't find anything on this truck. Do you have any, like a library where I could kind of do some research? And they told me, here's the library right here, and they gave me this fellow's. This is Clarence Youngworth, and he just this last month turned 94 years old. He still works 4 hours a day at the plant. He is the original draftsman for this truck, and he's become a very close dear friend of mine. And he's just a mountain of information. You can ask him anything. He was here in the original tests when Kinchla was operational. And he told me a story. He said, I remember when they took the Air Force, you had to be able to plow a 2-mile long runway in 30 minutes or less, a 300-foot wide by 2 miles. And that was the parameter to test this truck. And if you couldn't do that, don't even show up. That's what they told. There was 3 big dealers. There was Oshkosh, Walter Truck, and FWD Trucks. And they were like Chevy, Ford, and GM. They were the big 3. And Clarence said, I was there. He said that colonels drove up in their limousines and sedans, and then the captains, and then you'd see it down the food chain, there a Jeep, and then there's a pickup, and then there was guys walking. He said they dropped the flag, and all the generals they clicked their stopwatches, and the trucks came back 19 minutes later. And he said they all had the dumbest look on their face. He said they never said a word. And the next day we got a contract for 165 trucks. They ended up making over 1,000 of these trucks, and they deployed them worldwide. But anyway, Clarence was I dedicated the book to him because he is history. And he's also an author. He's written 3 or 4 books, and just a prince of a guy. Bill and I decided we're gonna take little blurbs out of each part of the book, and we call them war stories. We're kind of debating. Tell them about those, Bill.
Well, I felt it needed to have it shouldn't be like a textbook. It needed to have some sort of human element in it. And Jim was telling me these stories. I said, those are war stories. This is about during the Cold War. Let's call them war stories. So every time you see this little yellow pullout, it's going to be a quote from somebody. And there's some really funny things in here. It's the things that they didn't play by the rules sometimes. and it's kind of charming and funny, in this complicated piece of machinery, how they worked around certain stumbling blocks and things, their own little problem solving.
We broke it down, let's see, by the series of the trucks, how you can, if a truck spotter was to look at them, he would see different arrangements. You would know it was a 2206, but there was different modifications to them. I had to do a lot of research, and I met a lot of very interesting people. A lot of people from the military. I used the Army Cold Regions Research Lab up in Hanover, and there was a librarian there named Elizabeth. I can't remember her last name. Smollett, and she found the original test data from Rayco, Michigan. They tested these trucks at Rayco and Kim Schlow and a place called what's a place in New York? Not Plattsburgh.
Rome, New York?
No.
Watertown? Watertown?
Watertown was the that's where Seacard is from. Anyway, I have some photos from there also.
Oh, I see Watertown on there.
But she found these documents, and they were the Corps of Engineers did all the research work for the Air Force. In 1949, when they separated, it used to be the Army Air Corps, and then it ended up being SAC and the Air Defense Command and the Tactical Air Command. So all these Army airfields became Air Force bases.
That New York location might have been Lake Palisade? It's
There was one
quite
in
a cold
Plattsburgh,
region.
but it was Maine.
Oh, Maine.
It was
Yes, it was.
Loring Air Force.
Loring Air
That's
Force,
what-
maybe.
I'm sorry. Having a brain melt here. I met she found those documents, so they're all included in here to show you how they actually set this out to produce these trucks. They had to do evaluations, so they had their own design. And it didn't even look like this truck here, but it ended up being this. And at the end, you'll see how they reverted back to that design. All the new trucks out at the new airport are these new design trucks, but they look just like the ones from the 50s.
Everything new again.
I thought about, somebody was telling me something that your picture should be under this for being stubborn, under the dictionary for being stubborn. I said, yeah, and I got to thinking about durable. I said, that's what we'll put that in. And I told Bill, I said, if you look up the word durable, this truck here, able to withstand wear, and take a beating, so we stuck that in there. And as a definition, there's at the old K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base over at Gwinn, I was fortunate enough to have 3 of these ex-bases that had these trucks deployed at them within a 200-mile radius. K.I. Sawyer over by Marquette and Wurtsmith down by Oscoda. So Wurtsmith still has 7 of these trucks they use every winter. And K.I. Sawyer's got 2 left and 1 blower. And the old Kinchlow still has 2 W series, the 2206s. So the head of the museum there, it's a very nice museum. He has a lot of beautiful static displays. I said, did they leave any photographs? I said, I'm trying to put a book together on this plow truck. He said, yeah, they left some boxes in the back. So I went in the back room and they were up to the ceiling. It was like, I went through 7,000 photos and slides and I found 25 pictures, and I'll show you as we go through here, I'll show you some of the pictures that we used. Bill and I fixed them up and stuck them in there. It was about halfway through the book when I got to the gas engine. They started out with gas engines in the front and the rear. The rear engine had a huge 800 horse air-cooled engine to power the big snowblower on the front, and the front engine was a Hall Scott. And both of these companies have been out of business for 50 years now. So to find anything on the, hitting eBay, you might find something, a small brochure or something, but there was nothing. I ended up meeting the fellow that bought Hall Scott motor, and he was a very big help in finding me some manuals so I could show the actual engine parts and how they worked. The fellows from industry, I forgot Dr. Albright. I found the actual manuals, the Army military manuals each truck had 3 of them, and the parts books were included with each truck when they came in new, and they were, you can't find them, they're gone. And he had the whole set at the Corps of Engineers library, and he let me borrow them, and I scanned each one of them, and I made PDF documents for him, so it was a win-win for both of us. He wasn't going to let me have them. Then he finally broke down, and I said, well, I don't know if I can finish this book without those, because I just can't find remember we couldn't find the data for the trucks. Everything was in those books. They were so well made. I'll show you some of their photos in there. We had a lot of guys from the industry that these trucks, even from the start, their inception, and they all helped and threw stuff in there. Ex-people that worked at Oshkosh. I don't know what I just did, but that's ugly. This is the original designer, I'm sorry. That was Mr. Sartwell. He was the chief designer. That's who Clarence worked for. This is one of the photos we got from the K.I. Sawyer Library here. Bill had to doctor that up. It was very poor.
A lot of the images were substandard, but they were old photos.
40 years old.
And I said, they are what they are. And it shows history. And so we just left them. And then, of course, a lot of the pictures Jim took when he was very young was with a very inexpensive
grainy
camera.
Yeah.
And that just added to, I thought.
My $3 Grove drum camera.
I want to interject into the thing that I learned while we were talking about the photos was that in those days, those plows were basically on sack bases, which were secure. You didn't run around with a camera taking pictures of things on the base. So the fact that it's this much later trying to recreate those days to try to find those photographs, a lot of them just didn't exist because you weren't allowed access to them.
Yeah, they weren't.
So that was the big challenge too.
And the guys were just too busy. Alvin Ball is a contributor to the book. He's in the back row there, and he, they were just so busy. He was, how many hours a day did you work, Alvin? 16-hour days?
16 lots of days,
So nobody had time to, whip out a camera. But they were nuke bases, and the security was very tight. No drawings, no cameras, no maps. You just didn't do that. General LeMay was in charge back then, and he was a buster. And he created his own security force just to enforce that. And there was enough nuclear ordnance at Kinchlow to blow this planet up a couple of times. So all of those bases. Not a lot of people didn't know that, but they were just bristling with nukes. Each one of those B-52s had a couple of tactical weapons on them. So it was imperative that the runways were kept clear, because an accident, it would be a bad deal. Bad deal. But we started out with the W series trucks, and the old swept back cabs with the curvy hoods and the Indian head design on the hood. They were easy to spot. They had the round Stolter fenders, and the newer ones, the remans, had everything squared up on them. They were hard to get on the fenders, weren't they, Alvin?
Yeah.
To check the oil.
True.
And the smaller trucks in the W700 series usually towed this broom. They would take off first, and that would. I took that when I was a young man. That was at a display. I think they call them Armed Forces Day or something. And that's towing one of those brooms, and Phil from C-Card sent me some of these pictures. This is a control box that the fellow would have in the cab of the truck, and you could turn the broom left or right, and it had a big air nozzle right here that would blow out like a 200-mile-an-hour blast through this pipe towards the tail end of the broom. So the broom would sweep it out, and the wind would throw the snow even further. You had a tachometer that you would watch in the cab. If you went too fast, it would drag the broom speed down. So you had all the controls in there. You could turn the broom left or right with this button here, and you could raise and lower it with that. But this is the smaller brother right here of the 2206. This is a 36,000-pound truck right here. The 2206 was a 54,000-pound truck, and that's one right there. But it had a broom untied to it. They just had it for the display. Here are some of Tim's trucks here out at the. This is an old W712. How many you got left, Tim? 2?
2 of that style, yeah.
And this has got a different style broom on it. It's got the broom on the front, but it's got the blower mechanism on the back. But this is the old style here. This is a plastic camera picture here. Bill had the doctor do a lot of work on that one to make it presentable. This was robbed from a film. It took me 7 months to get this film declassified. It was classified, and I said, come on, it's snow removal from the 1960s. So the guy, they wouldn't give it to me because somebody just didn't bother to declassify it for public viewing. So I got in a big a peeing contest with a second lieutenant at the Pentagon. And I said, come on, man. I do it too. So I said, he says, I'm just not going to do it. And he got really nasty about it. And I said, someday I'm going to be talking to somebody a little higher in the food chain than you. And I'm going to tell them about this. And lo and behold, about 5 months later, I'm talking to the commanding officer at Minot, North Dakota, at the SAC base there. He says, I still got 2 of those trucks. He says, those are great trucks. And he's the one that told me how bad the brakes were in the B-52s. The B-52s, this truck was built to support the B-52s and the KC-135s, to keep those runways clean. And they were the only things that could do it in 20 minutes or less. And he said, if you have to, the old propeller-driven aircraft that were in the, after the 40s, that was left in the inventory, they just started to usher in the jet aircraft. They were pretty forgiving. You could reverse the pitch on the propellers and slow yourself down, but with a B-52, you have to have like 2 miles of runway to take off and to land to recover, and you have to use a parachute, sometimes 2. So remember, you're carrying nukes, and the KC-135 is carrying all kinds of fuel. So he said, if the wind catches the parachute, if you're landing and there's a crosswind, the chute will swing the tail of the aircraft around. Yeah. So you have to let go of it, and you have to stand. You and the co-pilot have to stand on the brakes till you get to the end of the runway. He said, and by that time, you're calling the fire department to come and put your brakes out or to cool them down. So he said, I said, I've been having trouble getting this little film here. Okay. And he said, what is it? What's the guy's name? So I told him his name. So he calls the Pentagon, and he says, let me talk to Lieutenant Jensen, he says. And, well, he's not as this. He said, I guess you better find him then. So all of a sudden, yes, sir, I hear this, and what can I do for you, sir? He said, I've got a good friend of mine trying to write a book, and I hear you're holding up this movie he's trying to get declassified. He said, what do we got, 65-year-old snowplow technology here? And the lieutenant was stammering. And he said, well, sir, it's not been released for public. He says, well, he said, for that to be, I gotta remember how he said it, for that to be classified, it better be parked in front of a hangar bay door at Area 51 with a UFO parked behind it. I started laughing. I was listening to him, and he said, I'm gonna put you on, it's like a conference call, just don't say anything. And I almost peed my pants off. And he said, and by the time I hang up this phone, that better be declassified, or you'll be working with me in beautiful Minot, North Dakota. So I said, I got a call about an hour later. The guy says, I've got that movie for you, sir. It was great. And I told the colonel, I said, man, that was, you're a master. I said, I haven't heard asked you like that in a while. It was great. That was a cool thing that happened during the production of the book. But that, I got those, I robbed those from a movie. And this is explaining there's one of Tim's trucks. This is out at, 2 years ago in the winter. I photographed that one. This is the actual, they had a catalog. That's a U.S. Air Force supply catalog stock number, and that was for the smaller trucks. These were the W-712s. This is one that's a local truck that got bought at an auction. It's sitting out in somebody's field. This is this one here just went through the reman program. We explain the dimensions of the smaller trucks and some of the blowers. This is Chippewa County's W715 blower. That's a smaller 34,000 pounder. I got this from the K.I. Sawyer Heritage Museum through all those boxes. And that's a W700. That's an Air Defense Command truck. And that was from the late 50s. There's the dimensions I got from Phil at C-Card. These are the gears. This is sort of it's a history book, photo journal, service manual. I guess what else do you call it? It's the kitchen sink. It's the kitchen sink. Bill and I call it the behemoth.
Coloring book.
Coloring book, yes. Good idea. How do you make it go back arrow? Left arrow? Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Just keep the space with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Remember this picture right here, that shiny new truck, that's a reman truck. It just came out of the program. Later on I'll show you its forerunner, what happened when it went in there. These were different. This is the difference between a 712 and a 2206. You can see the size of them, compare them. And you can see how easy it was in Oshkosh. You have the snowiest cities in the United States, Sault Ste. Marie. These are, I think, 65 number, 1970.
1970, yeah. Wow.
And Bill and I found that, and we, Marquette, just above us a little bit. I don't know where Blue Canyon is in California, but it must be up in the mountains. We don't have winters anymore like we used to, but I remember when I was a kid, we used to get some pretty good ones. But you can see the proximity just between here. You know, Rayco is a good test site in Kinchlow. And I think the last of the tests were done at Loring in Maine. And there's another one out of the reman program. There's two smaller 712s there in the corner. This was taken out at Kinchlow. I mean, Chippewa County. Those are two of Tim's trucks there. That's I didn't give up color because that picture in black and white, the book is very expensive because of the color. I mean, we really, I love, how many color photos?
Well, if this would have been printed, offset printed,
Oh,
it would have
man.
been astronomical.
It would have been at least
digital
$100
is the way
for
to
the
go.
book.
The problem with digital is it's not as good as offset printing. You know, we struggled with the company that printed it because I'm used to offset printing. I kept saying, this doesn't look good enough. And finally she just said, after like second, third proof, it's what's called pleasing color. So we had to be, you know, content with going with what we had. Because it would have been just really expensive to self-publish, you know, a quantity of books. Now, nowadays, we could have put it on Amazon.com's site called CreateSpace. And when somebody buys a book, one is printed for them. It's printed on demand. But the problem with that, too, is you don't know what the client's getting.
Yeah.
It's still digital printing.
It's still digital,
It's
but
not
you don't know if the page is going to be upside down or what, you know? So we were more comfortable, or Jim was more comfortable just ordering a quantity.
Yeah, and we can see what you would get, you know.
Well, they printed it several times.
Yeah, we had them do it a couple of times, but we
Yes.
didn't like it. I said, no, this is too dark. And then the binding was geeked on one of them. And I
Yes,
said,
and so it was
this
a
is an
struggle to
expensive
get
book,
it.
and I said, you just can't.
And later they told us it's one of the largest books they've ever printed.
Now you're telling us.
The Gutenberg Bible.
Challenging.
Anyway, I didn't give up color because of the dynamics of it. You know, this type of equipment, you know, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of black and white. We did a lot of the manuals, and I got this from this is from out in the missile fields out in Wyoming. There's another. This is out at Chippewa County. This came from this is a snow parade from Cheyenne, Wyoming, and they have those are the smaller 712s. This was an old picture I took. This was at Kinchlow when I was a kid. That's a smaller 712 down in the right-hand corner. This is from Loring. I met a fellow from Loring Air Force Base. He was a master sergeant there. This is also from Loring. This fellow here and here, this to just show you the size comparison of a man next to the truck. We're gonna maybe have these trucks available out at the airport tomorrow. If anybody would like to go out and see them, let me know tonight, and that way we can have them out. If you'd just like to go out, take pictures of them. I don't know if you would or not, but Tim can make them, park them outside so you can see them. I took that when I was a young fella. You can see the full-size Chevy next to it. That's how big this thing is. I was trying to tell Jan how big they were. I said, you don't really realize how big these trucks are.
I was talking to Margot just yesterday, I think it was, and she was saying when her grade school kids saw a plow truck, it was the first time, she'd ever been around anything like that, and how big they really are. And that photograph, when I saw that photograph, I went, holy crap, that is one very big thing. Because that is a very large car.
Driving your garage around.
Yeah, so.
I put a thing in there, that's just like driving your garage around at 55. Because it is. It was designed to go fast. It had a race engine in it. Because they had to beat this parameter to plow this runway. So Mr. Sartwell, he just put the tunes to this thing. It had dual 4-barrel carburetors on it, overhead cam. It was an animal. And it had an automatic transmission in it, so it just blew the doors off anything. But anyway, there's a fella standing, a full-size guy, and you can see this is this is the precursor to the 2206. This is a WA-2206. It had a stick shift in it. The ones that we wrote about, this is another picture here from K.I. Sawyer that we found in the box, the magic box. I had to write what was the need for the trucks. So I told you about the Cold War and what was happening back then. Here's some of the signs on the fences. If you can't photograph in this area, General LeMay. They had guard dogs everywhere. On the flight lines, on the alert pads, because of the nukes. So there's no cameras, no maps. It says in some of the drawings here. These are the fellows running to the aircraft. They had to be able to take off within 12 minutes of the alert siren. So the runways had to be clear. I got this from K.I. Sawyer. These are tankers leaving. They took off before the B-52s because they couldn't take off with a full load of fuel and a bomb load because they were so heavy that it would collapse the landing gear. So they had to refuel in the air somewhere over Canada. The deal was we would fly over the North Pole to attack Russia. That's what LeMay's plan was, because it was the shortest distance to the target. This picture was from the box at K.I. Sawyer. There's a couple of B-52Gs, 4 of them in line. And that's another one. There's a 52 and there's some 135s over there. That's from the magic box. That truck there ended up being here in 1995 when they had the huge snowstorm, and where they got 60 inches of snow, that one. That's the last unicorn from K.I. Sawyer. And it ended up getting sold to the National Guard for $1. And it was at Camp Grayling, and emergency management had the truck. So when the governor declared a state of emergency, they brought that one up here. Here's some of the tests that were made. They were done at Rayco. I found some old photos that Oshkosh had. Clarence found for me. These are some of the smaller W-series trucks. And these are the spec sheets for them. Bill did this for me. These are the project cards that went with the trucks to do the testing and evaluation to arrive at this, what are we going to clear the runways with? And these are the parameters that they set forth. This was from 1957. Bill, how'd you do that? It was just, did you make a PDF to make that?
Well, it's multi-step, as simple as it looks. Like I said, pretty much every image in this book, I had to intervene at some means. And to highlight these, I had to make an EPS file, switch it to a bitmap. Then I had to go into Illustrator, I had to put the color in, and then save it out. So, I'm just saying it's more to it than meets the eyes in a publication of this sort.
Oh, you just used a highlighter.
That was my idea.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I did years and years of legal graphics, and I did a lot of this kind of thing, because they depositions and such. So I knew how to do it, you know, but it just takes, Jim wanted to produce this book himself, literally. And he didn't even know how to use the program. And I convinced him, that's a bad
It's a bad idea. And he's right.
If you
Without
don't
an editor,
understand
yeah.
printing, then you're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, you really can't do something without a good graphic man or an editor. You can't do anything without an editor.
And he
That's-
wanted to edit it himself,
Yeah.
too.
Oh,
which
that's
is
a
like,
real
We went around a few times, didn't we?
Yeah.
Here's the original, the specs were written for this 5,000-foot runway. This is K.I. Sawyer from above. This was the original test parameter. It had to be able to do that. And it ended up being this, an additional 7,500 feet. So that's quite a bit. And here's the 52s taken off. They had water injections in their engines, so it made this real black sooty exhaust. There would be 9 more aircraft behind those 3 there taken off. These are the prototypes that designed, the Army designed these, the Corps of Engineers, this was their baby, but Oshkosh built the first batch in a company called DART. They had a cab forward, flat windshield, a universal hitch, an underbody blade for cutting ice. The drive engine was in the back, that's it back there. And it was 4-wheel steer, each wheel could craft the steering. And this was an 800 horse air-cooled gas engine to run a snowblower if you wanted to run a snowblower on it. It had the capability of doing it. And I explain all the different displacement plows. This is a rollover plow, a reversible, a one-way plow. One-way plows had a problem it was called deadheading. You had to plow with the wind. So you can only go down one way to plow with the wind, then you have to turn around and go back 2 miles and then start over. So this plow here, you could reverse it. You could put it in the center as a V plow, or you could turn it to the right or the left. So that was a design that they ended up keeping. And then there's some snow blowers. These are the different design snow blowers. This was one called a inertia, or a high-speed blower. It didn't have any augers in the front. And Air Force put all their eggs in one basket and said, well, this is the one that's going to do the job, because it can go 25 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour and blow snow. But it was real prone to plugging with the wet, heavy snow that we get here. But you could discharge either way. It had 2 discharge chutes on it, so you could go right or left. So we had to explain densities, snow densities. The way the Army did it, there's a part in here where they used a tube and they measured the weight of it. And I took this at K.I. Sawyer a couple years ago. This was a concrete, this snow had been here. It was like end of March. And that snow had been there all winter. It was just, I would have had to jump up and down to break through it. And he hit that bank and just started peeling that snow. It was effortless for that truck. Here's what happens when you go too fast. Both of these impellers are plugged up and the shear pins have broken in them. Alvin's changed a few shear pins in his day. And that's trouble there. You got to do a lot of shoveling. That's just like concrete in there. There's the truck actually working right, and that's powder snow though. This was the BX blower head that they finally ended up using on our trucks. And there's that's the WT-2206 with that. I showed what was happening with the problems that they encountered, broken axle shafts. Those are in this design here. Bill put this, you want to tell them about the way you laid it out with the,
well,
or do you want to do it on a different page?
yeah, let's just wait till, I mean,
Right.
it's hard to explain design. You know, you have to have an eye for design.
The way it flows, across.
Yeah, balance. There's a lot of things to that. You're doing very well, Jim. I'm learning some things here, actually.
Well, this
About
is
the
that,
truck that I didn't know before.
this is the 2206 that they ended up, that was their prototype 2206 with an automatic or a 3-speed semi-automatic transmission. And that, with that one plow that you could angle to the right or the left. And I found, Clarence sent me, I've got a set of the original blueprints of the truck right here. So Bill and I said, well, let's make that one of the header pages, a lead page. This was taken at Ward Smith Air Force Base in 1970, or 1960, and there's a fleet of 5. I think they're still there. This truck here, there was, after they approved the 2206 design, they had to have different attachments that were authorized. The Air Force got authorized everything. Military assigns a code to it, and they had to build a special truck to be loaded by the big blower because it was so big. They had 15-foot sides. It was a 15-foot cubic yard truck. So there was, I think there was, Alvin says there was 5 out of Kinchlow when it was operational. And that's all it did. That's all it was built for, was hauling snow with that big blower. There was a contest. The award was given to Oshkosh because, like, when the generals hit their stopwatches, this is it. So they kind of blew everybody else off. They said, this is the one we want. So the other company, Walters, said, oh no, our truck can do that. So the general accounting office got involved, and the contract got delayed for, I think, 6 months. But it was, they finally ended up, the lawyers from the general accounting office said, if your truck can't meet these specs, everything had to be, there was a drawing that they set forth. Oshkosh, C-Card, the snowblower company, and the plow truck companies all used the same drawing so they could standardize the truck so everything fit. And the way you can see the way the drive shaft runs for the snowblower, it runs all the way up the frame. And the way that the transfer case, that's the part that makes it distributes the drive power to the front and rear axles. That's the transfer case in that drawing right there. The way that the drive shaft for the snowblower is, on a Walter truck, this was over here. So they couldn't use it. So it ended up, Oshkosh got the award just because of that. You can see, this is the engine oil pan on Tim's truck, the snowblower out at the air Chippewa County. You see how close the drive shaft runs. They had to cut the oil pan and make a half moon in it so the drive shaft would fit next to it. There was that photo before. Bill and I doctored that up. I went through the drawings. This is I took it from the frame up, from a mechanic standpoint, because I know that the best. And I wanted to explain why it was so unique. So I was lucky enough to be able to go out and photograph Tim's trucks, and I could, whatever I was talking about, I'd go and I'd focus in on it. It's pretty technical stuff, but when you accompany it with a drawing or a photo, it's understandable. These are the drawings that we got from the military manuals, and they're very well done. They're almost like a draftsman put them together. The new ones look like cartoons. It's like night and day, and we use a lot of these. We elected to go black and white on all these because there's really no. And I go through all the components and explain. Here's what we did in color. Jan's shaking her head. Well, when I asked you, I would say, Blondie, read this. Do you understand this? And she said, yeah, I guess so.
Or no.
Sure, no. So we had to work on it. But Bill and I came up with the idea we would colorize the parts that matched and to explain how they went together. And then we just put the text to match the drawing. So these were all basically black and white like the top one, but we colorized the axles and the parts that were key to explain how they work. And I go through all the components in there, the brakes. But there's a lot of black and white. We use all black and white. Some of it we colorized so you can see actually where the oil went to make the part move. And there's another part of the ballast body was just was really all it was for weight. It was a little dump box. It wasn't very big. It looked really stupid on the truck because it was so small. But it was just to bring the truck up to a 44 or 46,000 pound operating weight. It had a 54,000 pound gross vehicle weight rating, so it could go quite a bit more than that. But most of the time most of them weren't even hooked up to where they would dump. The truck out at Chippewa County has this concrete counterweight assembly on it. This is the new design on the P-Series trucks. It's a regular cast weight that they put on there. And most of them had the 2x12 option, which was just that one here. That's a young James Menard photo. But here they are lifting one. Clarence sent me this from the factory. This was for a demonstration they had at some fair. It was to show this 1600 series wrecker that the Navy bought 500 of. And this was at K.I. Sawyer. I go through the transmission system, explain how a torque converter works, all the parts. Here's, if you would be hard to do, but if you drop that thing into reverse, you could become good friends with either the steering wheel, dash, or the windshield. Hopefully, you're on icy runway so the wheels wouldn't lock up. Because if you put it in reverse and you were going 45 miles an hour forward, it would go into reverse. So they had to have a mechanism to make it, that little rod right there had a spring-loaded deal so you couldn't jam it in there because it would actually lock you out. I got permission. In order to use a lot of these, we had to get written permission from, this was J.J. Williams. They bought the rights from Allison Transmission, so we had to get written permission to use these are from their service manuals. This was from the 1950s test. This is a dynamometer truck that would be towed whenever they wanted to check the drawbar pull in pounds. They would apply a brake on this dynamometer truck, and there was a load cell in that cable that's hooked between the two, and you could tell how much the drawbar pull was on the truck that way. You could load it right down. And I go through the components of the transmission. These were very nice drawings that shows the flow. Bill and I put the neutral, reverse. These were some photos from K.I. Sawyer, from the box. Some more. I took those, I think, 2 winters ago. You can see the power that this is out at Kinchlow. There's Alvin Ball's even got it. You could unhook the pin from the governor linkage on a Hall Scott engine to get 59 miles an hour out of them. That's the best we ever got out of one. A lot of the guys from around here were rascals. The Air Force frowned on it. This is the engine that, the race engine that Hall Scott made. It had a real unique design. It had a cast block. That was the main crankcase there. And the pistons were all one piece. It was the one part. It was a hemispherical head. That's a racing engine. Hemi heads, like you've heard of a Dodge Hemi, a 426 Hemi. It has round heads like a hemispherical dome heads. They had a propane version of the truck, but it didn't. Air Force didn't want to monkey with it, neither did the Navy. Navy was the other buyer. Jan's dad drove that other truck, that military truck. Here's one on the runway. I go through all the components of and explain everything. There's one of the Holley carburetors that went on there. And I go through the nomenclature tags and the cooling system. A lot of these trucks ended up in Antarctica and Greenland. The electrical system, I found the actual drawings for the electrical system. We photoshopped this because we didn't have a good photo of a 2206 with a strobe, but it's just to show the different design warning lights. Air Force Blue was this thing had two sets of spark plugs, one on the intake side and one on each side of the engine. One fella had the Air Force guy that was running the truck. This was out at Kinchlow when it was operated. The ignition switch had to be turned off because if you turned the engine over, the spark plug on the other side, the guy had his thumb over the hole when they were running the piston up to see where top dead center was so they could retime it. And the guy in the cab had left the key switch on, so when the piston came up, the spark plug on the intake side ignited and almost blew the guy's thumb off. So we put that little story in there. And that shows you the plugs on each side of the engine. I found the dimensions. Spike from Hall Scott sent me these drawings of so anybody that wanted to see what it was built like. This was taken out at Chippewa County right here. That's Tim driving that truck. Gregory, here's another one from the box. Caterpillar ended up, after a while, these big gas engine companies, leaded gas was starting to come into play and they started fading out. Continental made the big V12 gas engine in the back.
Well, how are we doing on time, Susan?
Oh, we're fine.
Oh, good.
Okay. And ended up, they turned them all into diesels. There's a Cat diesel. I used to work for Caterpillar, so I still had some friends there where I was able to get some we use these drawings out of their parts book. Bill, we erased a lot of the extraneous stuff just to show what we wanted to see. We had to get explicit,
Every one of these photos had
every one of
some
these
sort
sort
of
of, we had to
release.
have a limited copyright agreement. I have to reapply in 3 years. I was dealing with some guy in, where was it? Pakistan.
India, oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
Now I couldn't understand. I said, who are you? And he says, well, I work for Reuters and we handle Caterpillar's copyright agreements. So we were going back and forth. Where did you find this from? And I gave him all the numbers out of the, I said, well, I used to work for Cat. Here's the spec number. Here's where it came out of the book. And he didn't understand. So I ended up talking to a lady in Peoria and she squared it all away for us. But we used a lot of the parts books. Bill colorized this. That's my favorite drawing. Bill did a really nice job on that. We explain how a turbocharger works.
Stayed within the lines.
Yes, he did. That's our coloring book. He did a fine job. So we explained the different versions of the CAT engine. The universal hitch that was designed just for the truck, so it could hold either the plow or the snow blowers. And we explained all the variants. This was from Loring Air Force Base that I made a new friend there, Ernie Jenkins. This is from KI, sorry, here's another 2206 going the other way. This was at Wordsmith. This shows the design of the plow. This plow could roll over. I'll show you a drawing of it. It starts discharging to the right. You can pick it up, it spins over. So it ends up, when you got to the end of the runway, you would turn around and flip it over and go back the other way. That way you didn't have to deadhead. That's why the Air Force bought that. There was no wasted time then. There was a gear system in the hump of the plow in the back there, and it was run by cylinders. And that would rotate. How long does it take to spin that? About 5 seconds? From one right to left? 10 seconds maybe? There's a nice picture from Chippewa County. There's a trio of them. Had a lot of fellas from town here. I tried to find a lot of the fellas that drove them, and I got their little stories, and I thought that was history. They used to plow out to, I didn't know this, they used to plow out to 129 and out to Mackinac Trail. So the workers the people that worked on the base could get to the work. I didn't know they took them off the base, but there's one on 129. That's from K.I. Sawyer. And then Bill and I, we found the drawings, the hydraulic system drawings, and we colorized them. So we explained.
But there's a lot more in that image.
Yeah.
I took out a lot.
Yeah, he took a lot of stuff out of there. But to show you when you pull the lever, where the oil went and what it did, it would raise the plow or lower it. And we did that a lot through the book. These are photos from all over the world. That's in Japan. K.I. Sawyer, that's out at Kinchlow, that's K.I. Sawyer, that's in Greenland. That's up in the Arctic Circle. That's a young James Menard, that's a Kinchlow. They actually had there was a cartoon book that they would give to the recruits and it was called PM magazine, or PS. And they actually had one for this snowplow, so you didn't wreck them. This is from my friend out at Loring Air Force Base.
Barbie's got nothing on that lady, does she?
No,
No,
that's Connie Rod.
that's why they always have.
Connie Rod was her name.
Yeah, Connie Rod.
Got the guy's attention. Think of it now, guys, it's a coloring book.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Let's see, this is about the engine.
And these are all about the rollover plows, different shots of those. There's the. They had to deploy them all over the world, so Alvin told me they put 2 of them on a C5 Galaxy and took them out. They were going to Thule, Greenland, a blower in that truck. That one's going to Alaska on a barge, but those are the shipping dimensions, and there's a tag on it for everything. And I explained the different plows. This guy here, I found this on the internet, and I called him up and I said, can I use those photos? That was out in Montana somewhere at a radar base, and that truck got stuck and he had photos, and I said, well, I don't have any pictures of one of those deployed, so there it is. That's why I took that out at K.I. Sawyer, and my sister lived there that I used to read. Different types of plows. This one was a 24-footer. This was at K.I. Sawyer. We couldn't figure out who made this plow. It ended up being Walter Motor Truck Company, their fiercest enemy. ended up making a plow for this truck, and that's it. Nobody knew what it was, and Frank Civitoni, a fellow out in Boston, Massachusetts, has 5 of these trucks. He plows for the state. He said, I know what that is, that's a Walter plow. I said, get out. He said, no. So he sent me a drawing, so it's in here. I almost said it was something else, that would have been foolish there. They used to put 2 of the trucks together and put the large ends of the plows together so they could push the stuff to one side, and then they would take care of it with a snowblower, and there's 2 of them there. That's in Plattsburgh, New York. I think it is. When I had one fellow over at KI Series, we used to cook our food on those trucks. He said we'd bring a passy to work and set it on the manifold, and we'd make a couple runs up and down the runway, and they'd be ready. So I put my mom's pasty recipe in there, Julia's pasty recipe. They're very good too. So I put in there, cook times vary with length of runway. Snow depth will also affect the cook times and temperature settings. The deeper the snow, the hotter the oven. Always partially open the can. You can put soup on the manifold and make sure it's covered with some kind of foil wrap. You can put pizza on your manifolds and cook those up too. Always keep the valve covers or an engine tight to avoid that 30-weight motor oil flavor. So there's one on the manifold. We laughed when we put that together. There's another photo. We went through the hydraulic systems, the different variants. I told Clarence, I said, geez, I found like 4 different pump configurations. Well, what's up with that? He said, well, we just made the truck and we shipped them to some dealer, and whatever they had on the shelf, they threw on the truck. So there was 3 or 4 different pumps. There's one that you could shift in and out from the cab. There was a lever, and you could take the pump out of gear. It had like a little gearbox up on top here. And this one ran off the transmission, and this one just ran. Most of them were like this. They ran off the front of the engine. There was a little drive shaft. There's the drive shaft there. But I said, "What's up with that?" And he said, "Well, we didn't have really control of it. Once it left here, it just whatever was on the shelf." So the Air Force standardized it later on. The hydraulic controls, we found the drawings for those and showed you where everything went when you hooked it up. So if you actually had one of these, you could kind of put the truck together and actually run it. The underbody blades, there were different types of blades. That was a carryover from the 1950s test. That was for cutting ice. And there's the actual test that they did. Bill did a wonderful job with these graphics. Well, I'll tell you the way he laid them out. They actually had one that had a roller crusher. It looked like a disc harrow that would go, you would see out in the farm field with the discs, and they would lower that down with down pressure and try to cut the ice, but it really tore the runways up, so that they kind of poo-pooed that. This blade here only had a down circuit. That cylinder, there's one on each side. It would just push down on the lower edge of the blade, but it would end up rounding the end of the cutting edge off, so it really didn't scrape anything. The design that was eventually used was made by Wausau, and you could actually tilt the blade. It had a circuit where you could raise it up and down, plus you could engage with this cylinder here. You could make one side higher than the other. You can see right in that drawing there where you could actually tilt it, like if you were going to crown a road, to keep that crown on the road. But you could add extra down pressure, and you could really shave the ice. There was a lot of times they were plowing at night and the sparks were flying, wasn't there? And we did the explanation through the different circuits in the underbody blades. Bill colorized everything, and we took photos of them working and showing you what was happening when you pull that lever. And there was the rotation and the way the lock pin, this was a pin that would stay in these little locks here, so when you got it where you wanted it, when you angled the blade, you would drop those pins in, and that would keep it from getting knocked out if you hit a manhole cover or something ugly. There was a lot of levers in those cabs. Did you have 2 guys, Alvin?
No, just one.
Just one guy? You had to have an octopus. And these were called the lube journals that the Army had, and everything's got a lube order where it shows you have to show where all the grease points are, and this is the actual drawing from the 1950 manuals here. There's a picture from K.I. Sawyer I took a year ago. Another one there. Alvin Ball's the hero in this book. He's got a lot of cool stories. See, now this in black and white, this picture here I just didn't want to give that up. My editor was in that truck when I took that picture. I called her up, told her to put her mittens on, she's going on a field trip. I wanted her to see what it was like to drive your garage around. So the engine in the back here of this blower is actually an M47 tank engine. It's an air-cooled V12, and that's what they used because they were plentiful. And there's a different variants, and I explained how everything, it had louvers in the hoods that would raise up and down to help. It was air-cooled engine, so that every time it was controlled by oil pressure and a temperature switch, it would raise those louvers up and let air in. You could tell they had a real high, it sounded like a jet engine, because they had two huge turbine fans in the top. And there's the drawing I got from Phil at Seacard. These were from Seacard and the Air Force. Bill and I put these. He labeled those. Was that Photoshop, or was that, how'd you do that?
No, I did them in InDesign, the layout program. We just put the photo in place and then add the labels on top of
They're
it.
layers, right?
Yeah.
And this is out at Chippewa County. That's Tim's blower, and we did the same thing with those. A lot of good stuff there. This is the impeller casing. When you can discharge to the right or to the left. And here he is discharging. You can see the impeller casing rolling up. And eventually it's coming out the chute. You go when it's straight up. When that part there is straight up, it's coming out the chute. You can load trucks. And if you kept going, it would start throwing it out to the right or to the left. And I explained all the workings in the cylinders, how they were made. This is at last winter. Jan was in there on that ride. She took that picture right there over on that easel. That was from inside the cab of the truck. We go through all the components.
Oh, this is a good
So
story.
one fella here, it was Super Bowl Sunday. It was snowing for 3 days, and I was assigned the task of widening the streets and the base housing with my blower. I remember people carrying food trays and cases of beer in for the parties. As I turned the corner, I was able to blow the snow into a big field, and when I rolled the impeller casing to the right, the force of the snow coming out of the chute knocked the cable TV line off the pole. I had blacked out the game and the cable TV until the next day. Don't put my name after this, they're probably still looking for me. His name's right there, Dwayne.
We know who it is, and I talked to him, and I invited him, and he's not here.
They're probably still looking for me. But that's that special truck they had specially built. This is Loring's fleet of them. They had a boatload of them. And they had to have an airman walk alongside because kids would make little snow forts and they couldn't hear the snow blowers coming. Apparently somebody got killed up in one of the other bases. I don't know. It could be a urban legend, but that's why they made the airman walk. It was usually somebody on somebody's list because it'd be cold out there walking
Oh,
alongside that
tell
boat.
them about the tricks those kids would pull with
Oh.
the
A lot of the guys would play tricks on the snowblower operator. They would get a 5-gallon pail of, they used a dye to mark the outside perimeters of the runway. It was called monkey blood. It was like an indigo color or a red-violet dye. And they would wrap that pail in a coat and leave it in a snowbank. And when the guy hit that, the coat would fly out and the blood, it would look like he'd kill somebody. It was really a cool joke. I got a letter from a guy that bought the book. He was from, where was he from? He was in Alaska, and he said they did that up here. He said one of the guys had a heart attack because he thought he'd killed somebody. It just drove him nuts.
What about cars in there?
Oh yeah, it'll eat cars too. Cars up there. But anyway, they had to have a guy walk alongside that. And there it is loading. You can see the drifts there. That's at the end of the runway somewhere.
How long would it take to fill that truck?
I think, what was it, 4 or 5 seconds?
Yeah.
A yard a second usually.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine filling a truck that fast?
Didn't take very long. The little army trucks that were here during that storm, it only took like, I think, 5 seconds. Because they were so small. But we go through all the systems. This one here, a guy from Griffiths told me, he says, I ate a drogue chute. The chute on the back of the B-52 when they land, when they get close to the taxiway, they jettison that chute and the exhaust from the plane blows it off and a guy comes up in a pickup and picks it up and they repack it and put it back in the plane. But somebody didn't come and pick it up and he ate it with a blower and it broke both sets of the shear pins. He said it was wrapped around the shroud lines, the little nylon lines that go out for the rigging were wrapped up so tight. He said when we cut the lines with a knife, they unwound so fast that they had to go to the base fire department and get those big aluminized Kevlar suits, and it was cutting into the arms of the suit because it was 800 horsepower worth of wrap. So he said we had a hell of a time with that. And some guys, Ray Young told me, he was an operator from the Sioux, another rascal story. The shear bolts that they put in there are just grade 0. They have no tensile strength to them. They're half-inch bolts, which is pretty sturdy. There's 2 of them in this, there's this huge hub that the drive shaft hooks to. He said they used to leave those in there, and they'd go and get some bolts, and they'd get them red hot, and they'd quench them in oil to harden them, and they'd carry them around in their pocket. And when they broke those soft ones, they'd put those hard ones in and run all day long, and then take them back out, put them back in their pocket, so they didn't have to get out all the time. Well, these guys from the Sioux, boy. There's a shot from K.I. Sawyer. That was from the box. That's some deep snow. This is a very rare part of this is called the high-speed blower. They only made 16 of them. And that was a carryover from those tests. It was a dud, but it worked in the dry snow really well. And I explain all of it. This is what replaced it. This was the high-speed. These were the actual tests from Loring, Maine in '70. This is the one from Wurtsmith. They've got one left down there. That's a 2206. You can see the cast distance. See, that wouldn't look good in black and white as far as I'm concerned. Look at that. This is out at last winter. My editor is in the passenger seat. And this, I go through all
How come you
the...
never called me to go?
doing something
The
else.
editing. I mean,
You were busy on with your graphics.
This was
Oh, I was putting the book together, that's
Remember,
right.
Jan, tell them about this.
The strawberries.
Yeah,
I said to him, why do you have a pan of strawberries?
yeah. Well, she wouldn't let me use the word puke.
No, I wouldn't.
See, when we used to run engines on the dynamometer at Caterpillar, when it was called a throttle bump, you would slam the throttle ahead at when you had the rack set real high to get the horsepower up, and you would slam it ahead, and these flames would shoot out of the stacks. They called it puke. Flames would puke. So I said, well, how come you change? What do we use?
I can't remember, something stupid.
Anyway,
In retrospect, right.
yeah, it was belching.
Belching,
Belching.
yes.
I
So
said, you can't put
that's
puke
my
in
editor.
there."
You can't put puking in there, she said. But here's a breakdown of the engine and the fans. The cooling system. I went all the way through it. There was a little button in there that every time you oversped, when you broke those shear pins, there was a little red button in the back, and if you didn't reset that button, it wouldn't start where it out.
No.
And it would flood the engine out, and the spark plugs were ungodly to get out. You had to have a tool to take the plug wire off, and a tool that was about this long to get the spark plug out, and it took forever. And you do that out on a cold runway in the middle of the night. You only do that one time. You learn how to push that little button. This was taken last winter here. And there's a throttle bump where you get the smoke. That's the Caterpillar. This is the diesel variants. I found Phil from Seacard, this truck here, this is the actual shipper. This truck ended up in Loring Air Force Base, and that's the actual shipper. It was like $13,000. They would get that truck and put that, the engine would be on it, but they would put all this on. The blower and all the hydraulics and the drive. And that was pretty cool find there. I found the blueprints for the engine. And put those in there. Had to get a present from God to get those. This talks about the rebuild program. Remember I told you about that truck in the very first part? That shiny one? That's it when it went in. They took them right down to the bare frame, sandblasted everything. Here's a guy repairing a cab. They took them right down to nothing, and then refurbished them, repainted them, and gave them a 2-year or a 1-year warranty. And here's a couple new ones. And then the end of it, the Air Force, these trucks were lasting so long that Oshkosh hates this truck because they couldn't sell new ones because it's so durable. It lasted, come on, it's going to blow up. But they just kept bringing them in. The Air Force said, hey, let's just rebuild them. You know? It was a fraction of the cost of a new one. So this truck today, if we built one of these today, just like it would be, Clarence told me it'd be in excess of $750,000. Originally, what was it, $34,000? This one's in a junkyard. This is where they're ending up. This is one of Frank Civitone's trucks here. 2 of his 3 trucks. He's a 2206 fan. He painted them up for a big, for a parade. And there's a couple more of his trucks working. Very rarely you would see a broom on a 2206, and there's one there. That's up at Elmendorf. This is what replaced it, a P series. You see that design from the 50s? This is what they are now. This is K.I. Sawyer. Chippewa County International's got, there's one there at Chippewa County. That's the new H series. This truck here, this is from one of those. This was $36,000 originally, brand new. This is the big storm. That shows the cast distance of the power of that 2206. This is the storm. I found that Carl Bonack, the weather, you hear him on the radio, sent me these drawings. This was that storm in '95. It shows it coming in and then as it left. I've got this is the letter from the governor declaring the state of emergency. These are the small trucks that the Army brought in. They brought a boatload of those trucks in, and it took like 2 seconds to fill them up because they only had a 5-yard box on them. He ate a couple cars. We ate a few cars in the drift. First one was a Toyota, caused minimal damage, and just required the changing of the auger shear bolts and some straightening. There was usually a vibration that was recognizable, and then a snowdrift would start jumping around about 20 feet in front of you. And there's my editor, when she gets what it's like to drive your garage around. Bill, I told Bill, I said, people kept sending me stuff about the trucks, and I said, God, we got to close this thing out. It's a monster. So I told Bill, I said, what are we going to do with this? I said, this is part of the history. And so we elected to throw it in the very back. This is from the Oshkosh Public Library. It's from the newspaper, and it tells about that contract where the generals. Then, Jan, you want to explain all the bibliography stuff?
Just, that part of the framing part of the book, obviously, he had so many references, we absolutely were committed to some type of a bibliography and resource reference. So he said, what's that? Well, we need that. Let's put that in. So it really just references all of his resources, resource material.
So we had all the manual numbers. That's pretty much it.
That's the face of God right there.
That's the face of God, Jan calls that one. She took that with her cell phone. There's the other one she took on the easel over there.
Hey Jim, you didn't mention the flow rate out of the exhaust for the snow.
For the
That
snow.
flow rate for the snow.
Oh, 300 tons an hour.
Yeah.
An hour?
Yeah. But
It's a lot of snow.
it took a lot of research, and
Yeah, I think you're right.
we were lucky enough to have enough bases around here, the old bases where they were deployed. It was hell to find information on them, that was for sure. I thought I got in a little bit over my head when I got to the gas engines. I thought, oh, this is done. And then when Elizabeth at the Coal Regions Research Lab, why don't you try this guy? And you just have to network, call this guy. Well, I know where I saw some of those. It was fun. Now there's something about the 2206.
Question with the competition, FWD was in Clintonville,
Clintonville, Wisconsin.
Where was that other, where was that one?
They were from Voorhees, New York.
Okay.
Walter truck. The actual designer, the founders of Oshkosh, one of them started FWD, Besserdich.
Okay.
And he was sort of like the tinkerer, and Mosling, B.A. Mosling was the,
And he was at all those.
they went into partnership and formed the four-wheel drive truck
And
company.
he was in charge of
And
all the cruise missiles. And
Eventually, Besserdich bailed on it, but you couldn't get on the roads in the winter in Wisconsin back then, so they had a four-wheel drive idea. If we can make those front wheels go, so they designed it. And there was a fellow named Otto Zachow. He was like the blacksmith. Where's Bill? He was the blacksmith that put everything together to make the front wheels turn. And those two companies split. And Oshkosh is one of the biggest. In fact, they're the biggest truck manufacturer in the world right now. They have the contract. If you go down to the Armory, you'll see all those Hemmets, those 8-wheel drive off-road trucks, they make those. They make the medium family of tactical vehicle trucks, the 5 tons, the 2.5 ton trucks. Almost any airport that's anybody has got Oshkosh snow removal and fire trucks. They make crash trucks. And the Air
We
Force
thought they
is,
just made bib and tuckers.
yeah, nice little bib
Little
overall.
baby dude.
But we had a lot of fun. I did.
It was funny because about 3/4 of the way through the book, Jim calls me and goes, on page 253, I put that photo of the truck with the plow.
Yeah.
What? You know,
One of the
the
plows.
plow.
We had
Be a
thousands,
little more specific.
we had thousands of photos. But I didn't want to give the color up. The book's very expensive, but there's a lot of work in there, and we got the margin down to where it's on sale at eBay for $67, and it regularly through the website it's $57, and then whatever the state tax is, $3. But there's a lot in there, and I've got a lot of 5 stars on Amazon now. I was on there the other day. I was, wow. So,
Actually, I think when Jim went to Oshkosh, had a convention of sorts
Yeah.
in April, and sadly, we missed the deadline for that, but the guys were all saying that not only is, as Jim pointed out, it's a piece of history, but if you had one of these things, you literally could repair it or rebuild it or find the part that you needed for it. And I think I know more about a 2206 than I thought I'd ever know. I'm just saying, but it's a hell of a thing to ride in, I'll tell you. It's a great thing. But you know, we've all been around the Sioux, well, most of us in the snow. You take these things for granted in so many ways until you literally have to climb up inside one of these things. It is a whole other world. I just can't imagine getting paid to do it, eh, Tim?
It's fun for about 10 minutes. Because they over-engineered the trucks,
Yeah.
but there's no creature comforts in them.
No, I'll attest to
The seats aren't
that.
very soft.
Pretty
what were you
basic.
saying to Pee Wee? Like, can you see?
Yeah,
Can you see what you're doing?
Yeah,
Nope.
how do you see out of that?
Pee-wee here, Pee-wee. He's driving this truck, and I'm looking, I said, Pee-wee, can you see anything? He said, no. I said, well, you know where you're going? He said, I've been doing it for a long time. I said, well,
Jim, we need to put a couple of copies of your book on the seat for him, I guess. Maybe just 2.
What's that?
Raise them up, need to put a couple of
Yeah.
copies of your book on the seat.
Yeah.
Raise them up there.
But climbing up into that thing, you can nosebleed.
It's a long way up, isn't it?
Yeah. But you know, when they first approached me about doing this, I said, oh, you gotta be kidding me. The beautiful thing about, I think, this book is that Jim obviously writes with a sense of humor. And I mean, once you have humor in your book, you've engaged your audience right now. And not only that, but he's done it in a very nice way. There's a lot of history about why it's, when I look at the history of this truck, I also can look at the history of Sault Ste. Marie in a lot of ways, because that sack base did a lot of things good and bad for this town, but basically it was a very large chunk of our history, and that's very well represented in this book, obviously, or that piece of equipment wouldn't exist. But it was interesting to, as an editor, to try to look at all the different components in this book and try to, you know, pull it together from the sense of an audience. What kind of an audience are you targeting for a piece of a book like that? And then to just to, you know, to try to put all components together with it, that it is a piece of history. It really is. The images that he's been able to collect here. When I hear he's on the phone with the Pentagon, and he's, you know, and I go, you know, I can work with this guy. He is willing to go out and do all that he needs, all he can do to get the material that he needs. The other thing I was want to impress anybody who's writing books like this, when you are at the extent of background material for, I mean, other than just a fiction book, if you have resource material, if you can hang on to it, you need to hang on to it, because there are times when, if you wanted to go into a reprint or a rewrite or whatever, you need to substantiate that information. So there's a lot of aspects to putting a book like this together that bear.
Save your files as you go.
Oh, oh, you know what, that's something else I wanted to bring up. Actually, Jim taught himself InDesign, which is a program that I'd like to learn to use. I haven't. I'm more of a Microsoft publisher kind of a girl, but because Bill does in-depth graphics, obviously, he was familiar with InDesign and wanted to do that. So Jim picked up a copy of the program and he taught himself how to do this. Amazing, amazing.
Yes.
Really. But so here they are in basically the Apple world, and I'm in the PC world, and we're trying to do that. And one of the things that we accomplished, actually, Jim did everything. He took literally every page and created a PDF. And I thought, well, let's see, I can work with the PDF. So I went out to Adobe, and they have Adobe, I think it's called Export PDF. They also have actually another package of PDFs that you can, different ones that you can buy. Either you can contract with them, subscribe by the month, or you can, I think the Export PDF costs about $20 a year. And through that, I just downloaded it, and I was able to take his PDFs, convert them to Word, edit them,
Send them back.
and send them back as a PDF. So it was very cool. It was very easy to work. But the other thing about it is I want to say one thing. In a book, please, your odd page is on what side?
Right.
Right side. Obviously not.
The bottom side.
Your odd page
It's on
is
the
on the
bottom.
right, and it starts your chapter. So many books, people get, if you start a book, please.
What's the
There are a million
reason?
things. There are a million things you can do in formatting a book, but you always start on the right.
What's the reason? Because we're in the
God.
northern
Well, you
hemisphere?
know, we try to keep some sort of uniformity through the book because there's so much information. So Jim wrote it on the fly, basically.
He did.
He learned InDesign and just started producing, page by page, collecting the information and writing it. And he just kept going. So consequently, every page looked different from the last. I said, that's not going to work. You're going to lose your audience, and there's no, rhyme or reason to it. So I established a layout, and we stuck to it.
Yeah, and the other thing, when Bill did do that with the photographs, now he had how many, 700 photographs that we were working with. And what I appreciated that Bill did in his design, and I think as a reader you would too, is that he basically said, okay, we're going to have basically two size drawings here, or images.
Broke the rules a few times.
A couple
but-
times, but basically we kept, in his photographs, if you go through there, and
Well,
what that...
width, in terms of width, because we had
Right.
columns.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it basically kept your eye in a very uniform way. I mean, you weren't, it kept it less busy, and it kind of kept, now in some of them it's sad that some of the images, because they are maybe smaller, you lose some of the detail, but still. And kept a continuity with the font for the text and a continuity for the captions. So those are things that you want to, when you're putting a book together, you want to keep.
And then
in mind.
also, as a designer, you're looking at balance, you're looking at how the eye flows through each page. And a lot of these blowers were throwing snow. So you had these big swooping diagonals through the pages. And that's all part of the design.
Brush strokes, yeah.
So that as you look through it, it's leading you through each page, not out the page. And, it's just keeping your interest within, a page layout,
Well,
a spread, if you will.
I think the other thing too, that both Bill and I have done, we've worked with publications before, but we've always dealt with basically a printer in an offset mode. And you have a totally different experience than what
That's
we
where they
have
take
here.
ink and they put it on a press, and you've got a pressman and you've got apprentices, and they stop the press every so often, they look at it, they adjust. But what printed this was a machine, maybe the length of this room, maybe not quite. They put the file in, and a printed book comes out the other end.
Yeah.
Done. There it is. Everything, trimmed, everything. But there was a sacrifice in the quality. And I suppose in 5 years or so, it'll get better.
Yeah, and there's no standardization in it yet. So each company.
Oh, yes, that's right.
InDesign,
We
or,
went to Create Space.
we use a company from Ann Arbor.
Called, yeah.
Digipod.
Digipod. And what they were requiring from me was one thing, and then we went to Create Space. They
Yeah.
wanted something else. So if we went to a third, they probably would have wanted something else.
Yep, there was no, it's like a beginning industry.
Yeah.
So there's no standard, like offset printing, there's rules. Well,
Mhm.
tell them about the bleeds, Bill, where we had
Oh.
trouble with bleeds.
Yeah.
Well,
Like that's a bleed. You see the,
well, when any image runs off the edge
off
of the
the edge of the page is
trimmed
called a
off.
bleed.
Uh,
Those war stories.
It was really fascinating because with digital printing, you would go through a proofing stage. You'd send your files in, and then it would come back automated proofing.
Yeah.
Humans didn't look at it. So it picked up ridiculous things that were invisible.
Yep.
There were no mistakes, but it said there were all these mistakes. So we fought with the mostly Create Space, I think. 'Cause
Yeah,
we
that
got
was a
proof from
pain
them.
because you had to send them an email and wait for them to answer you back. So
But the
that
other
was-
thing about it is, at least in those instances, they could talk to somebody where.
Yeah,
Digipod really did.
they did a
worked
nice
with
job,
us.
and they did work with us because we were pretty picky. And we got, but we,
But also the difference here is that if you're going to publish something like this in a digital format, you don't, if you go to a printer, you're going to have to commit to 1,000 copies of this book. Where Jim did not have to do that by going in a self-publishing digital mode. So I think it's, how much money have you got? What are you willing to put out there and hold on to? What's your marketing game for that? Basically, what is your option as far as how you expect that thing to come back to you? So I think we just wanted to throw that out to the audience tonight to let them know it was just a little different experience than I think we'd had before, but it was a good one. And in truth, I was shocked at the quality of the books that came across from them.
it took, what, 3 shots before we got, really? 3 proofs.
I believe it. Yeah. I used
Yeah,
that.
then,
And one of the things you don't even factor is the cost to ship them.
yeah, we went down and picked them up because they were Ann Arbor. I said, hell, I'll come down again. It was like $500
It
or
was
something to ship.
$500
I said, I don't
to
think
ship
so.
it. Jim's, I'm on my
So
way.
my wife and I
See you in the
pick up
morning.
an offer and I'll see it. Are they ready? Yep. Okay.
Go down there in one of your trucks to pick them up.
That's it. 2206 for a ride.
Well, the box is too cute.
And Stella went with him. He's
Yeah,
dog.
Stella, my dog. Well, you can't, a lot of people have bought these trucks, and they think, well, I'm gonna go plow this parking lot at Walmart and stuff. You can't drive these on the road because they're so heavy. They're over, the guy with the red light on the roof of his car will just follow you around with a ticket loop because the axle, the width between the axles is so small and the weight is so great, even when you start taking stuff off of them, they're still overweight. Burton bought one and he just, I'm gonna plow all these. No, you're not. And the guy was out there, state police were out there, the MDOT, and they were just writing tickets left and right. So he ended up parking it.
How do the runways stand the pressure? They must be very well made.
Well, how thick are they, Tim? 2 feet?
Yeah, 28 inches. and
28
7
inches thick with 1-inch rebar in them, I think.
Wow.
That's to support a B-52.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, the
Michigan
hard,
is a swamp,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, that's true.
Michigan is a
And
The
Kim,
hardtats are thicker than that. They're 6 feet where
Yep.
where the C5s used to, they parked the C5s.
And these three, the 2206s, the B-52s, and the KC-135s are still operational. After 56 years, 57 years. B-52 is our main bomber still. That's just an animal, but it's gone through remand programs. So this is a part of history that just keeps on ticking. It's like the ever-ready bunny.
Well, thanks very much. I think we better.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you guys a lot for coming out.